Hello and welcome to the Natural Animal Podcast. I'm your host, Ruth Hatton. I'm an animal naturopath and just a big animal lover in general. Here on the show, we share thoughts and ideas about the nature of animals, their preferences, their behaviours, and their ways of being to engender a greater understanding, respect, compassion, and love for all animals, companion, farm, and wild. I've got a very special show for you today with a former colleague and fellow animal lover, Ondine Sherman, one of the co-founders of Voiceless, the Animal Protection Institute. It was such a wonderful experiencing reconnecting with Ondine. She has such a big, compassionate heart that touches all aspects of her life. And I hope you enjoy this special opportunity to connect in with that and learn more about the wonderful work that Voiceless does in advocating for a just and equitable world for all animals. We cover a multitude of topics in this chat, including Ondine's journey as a lifelong animal advocate, her experiences in Sydney and Tel Aviv, and the incredible work Voiceless has accomplished over the past 20 years, from tackling factory farming and the commercial killing of kangaroos to fostering empathy in children through innovative programs. Ondine shares her passion for promoting compassion and respect for all creatures. Ondine also shares her experience with her beautiful boys who have a rare disorder, how that saw her step away from animal advocacy for a while, how she navigated this period, and how she found her way back to the animals. Today's episode is brought to you by Frontier Pets, creators of nutritionally superior pet food inspired by traditional whole food diets with a modern and ethical approach. Stay tuned for a special podcast listener discount. Hello, everybody. I have someone from my past on the show for you today. Her name is Ondine Sherman. She's a co-founder and managing director of Voiceless, the Animal Protection Institute. And I actually worked for Voiceless back around the 2010, 2011, 2012 time period. And that's where I first met Ondine because she was one of the founders with her father, Brian. And it was like my dream job, and I was excited. I just learned about animal law, and I'd gone to a Voiceless Animal Law lecture series, and I was like, oh my God. And then they advertised a job, and I was like, oh, I have to have it, and I got it, and it was super exciting. I think I speak about that in episode 1 of the podcast, but Ondine is here with us today. And Ondine is a lifelong animal advocate. She's passionate about promoting respect and compassion for all creatures. And she does this through her organisation, Voiceless, and through the books that she writes and many, many other publications and projects that she's involved with. She grew up in Sydney, but she now lives near Tel Aviv with her husband, who I've also met, and 3 children who I think I've met most of them, and her mischievous street cats, loyal dogs, and rescue chickens and rabbits all keep her very, very entertained. So Ondine, I'm super proud to have you on the show. Welcome to the Natural Animal Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here and to see you again after too long.
So long, yeah. Can't even count the years. So I would love for you to first share for our listeners and our watchers, how did your journey with animals begin?
So I'm one of those people who, as a kid, was obsessed with animals, loved animals. We had, a dog at home and a cat, and my journey began with a very transformative moment when I was 7 years old, sitting at the dinner table, and my grandmother lived with us, and her background, or part of my family background, is Lithuanian from that generation, And it sounds strange to say it now, but the traditional foods, one of them was tongue. And she had made us all dinner, and I remember, cutting up the meat and bringing it to my mouth and looking at it, and it was kind of like brown and weird looking. And I was like, "What is this?" And she said, "Oh, darling, it's tongue." I'm like, "What does that mean, tongue? Like, I
Mm.
like my tongue?" She's like, "Yeah, like a cow's tongue." And I was like, "What on earth? Like, who eats somebody's tongue?" And then I realized that meat was animals. I think it's kind of a common thing to happen now, I realize, around that age when you put together, you know, um, animals with meat. So then the kind of um, yeah, I
It was the
understood
exact
that
same age.
night.
It was the exact
Yeah.
same age as me, 11.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
tongue though.
Yeah.
There was like, we had people staying at our house and they were vegetarian. And as you know, people
Right.
always ask vegetarians and vegans, why do you eat this way? Da, 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 da. So it was this like, yeah, it was for me, it was like, oh, I don't have to eat animals. It's like I was given a
Mm.
permission slip. So there was no like kind of like weird, not normal eating experience like tongue, which
Yeah.
obviously for your grandmother's culture, it wasn't weird. It was completely
Yeah.
normal. But it's that kind of age, especially for animal loving children, where it's like, what?
Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, I realized that, all the food that I'd been eating was animals, and I loved animals. And then the second major thing that happened was I was walking with my dad, and came across a street stall for animal liberation, New South Wales. And they had petitions and pictures of factory farming and, terrible things that were going on. And yeah, I remember standing there. I think I must have been around maybe 9 or 10 at this point, and looking at the pictures just in horror. And I signed up to receive their magazine. I became a member,
Yeah.
and then I remember lying on my bedroom floor with my dog Bronny. Um, I must have been about yeah, 10 or 11, and this magazine wasn't meant for kids, so there was some pretty horrific things in there. And there was an article about they'd gone undercover in a pig slaughterhouse, and were looking, reporting on all the cruelty that was happening. I mean, apart from the legalized cruelty, just the kind of day-to-day cruelty happening in the abattoir. And yeah, I made a promise to my dog, Bronny, like lying on the floor that day, that I was going to try and help her and all animals, and that's what I would spend my life doing. And yeah, that was one of those moments. And then that was always in the back of my head. And there, as we know, there weren't very many opportunities to have a career helping animals apart from being a vet, for example. Um, so I couldn't quite find a way in until later on. But yeah, throughout my teenage years, I was very involved in activism and going to protests and um, yeah, different things. So I kept it up, but I was always looking for that moment where I could realize you know, my fate, my destiny.
A way that you could, bring this into your like life and working life and make it your mission. And your family is, I mean, I think I've met all of your family, your mother, your father, your brother. So growing up, the family that you grow, that direct family that you grow up with. I mean, I only knew them from the Voiceless era when I was there. And so, for me, it's kind of like they must have, I mean, and you saw that stall with your father. Was there a shift in all of your family or your direct immediate family at that point in time, or was it just you?
I think looking back, I realize how supportive they all were. I mean, apart maybe from my brother. Um, but nobody was vegetarian or vegan at that time, and it took a long time for that to happen. But
Mm.
the fact that they supported my choice, they didn't try to convince me out of it. They cooked special meals for me.
Mm.
Um, and I felt they were proud of me. Like they would say to their friends, oh, and little Ondine is vegetarian. And so it was kind of it wasn't a shameful thing or something they tried to, you
Mm.
know, move me out of. Um, my dad then, I would say maybe 4 or 5 years later, I became vegetarian as well. And then my brother did in later years, and my mum, yeah, eventually, pescatarian.
Mm.
So it did change things, but not in an immediate kind of abrupt way. It was, but yeah, looking back, I think those values of loving animals, I think they were very present in my family, under the surface. Just how
Mm.
we treated our animals at home. They were like family. Um, yeah, a lot of empathy and thoughtfulness for others, human and non-human. So I have to credit them.
Mm. Yeah, well,
Uh,
it comes from somewhere, right? And you can either be born into a family where they can criticize your choices or they can support your choices, or sometimes it's a merging of the two that is fluid and changes. But obviously, you were very impressionable. I don't know if that's the right word, but very impressionable on them, because ultimately they, and especially your father, bless his heart, bless his soul. I did mention him in episode 1, actually.
oh, thank
Just a
you.
little,
Yeah,
advocacy for
miss him
him.
very much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm sure you do.
yeah.
And what was I going to say? Completely lost my train of
How
thought
they
there.
changed.
How they changed, and you were
Yeah,
like, they changed, and you were like this. I don't know. You must have been really inspiring for them. That they had you as an inspiration, and then you created, Voiceless with your father.
yeah. I think I was they couldn't quite get over how stubborn I was and how I just didn't, give up on it.
Wasn't a
So I think
passing
everybody,
phase.
yeah. And even, I remember going to like birthday parties at the time, back in the 80s Australia, you had the choice of sausage rolls or,
Party
meat
pies.
pies or, yeah. And I would just have like bread with margarine or like the burger with the margarine and nothing, because I
Mm.
was also like a picky eater and didn't like vegetables. So
That's
I would just
hard
eat
when you're a
bread with
vegetarian.
margarine like for lunch. Um,
That is not a healthy
so
diet, make.
yeah. Yeah. So I think they thought I was a little bit weird, but perhaps inspirational. I'm not sure if they would have used those words, but
Mm.
stuck it out.
Weird is good. And, you were on a mission, and you're still
Yeah.
on that mission, and you followed through all of these years later. Like, I know the time when it was that you moved from Sydney to, and it says in your bio, it says you're near Tel Aviv.
Hmm.
Um, what is life like there? And are you involved in any animal advocacy work over there?
Well, if we put the situation at the moment to the side, which
Yeah.
is very fraught,
Yes.
I mean, life in terms of as relates to animals and the animal movement and the vegan movement here is pretty amazing, actually.
Mm.
I was just in Sydney, and the difference between just going to a cafe and trying to find something to eat on the menu is just like there was just like nothing
In
for
this day and
me. I went
age,
to
it's crazy.
two restaurants that had like zero vegan options on the menu,
Yeah.
and maybe one vegetarian. Um, so here. it's what they call it, like the vegan capital of the world. It's just such a huge vegan movement, and everywhere, like on menus and in even shoe stores, um, you have the vegan friendly label or a
Yeah.
little tick and symbol. I think, yeah, they had an animal rights march here a few years ago, which I think was like the biggest in the world.
Mm.
Um, and it's just very fashionable with the young generation. There's just a lot of vegans.
Yeah.
And and I mean, the food is great. And there's a lot of vegan startups like food tech, alternative proteins. I
Mm.
was at an event a couple of weeks ago, which was supporting women in the alternative protein field,
Yeah.
or the yeah, I mean, there's so many words to describe that. The plant-based,
Is that the stuff that they're
meat-free, clean
growing
meat.
in labs with like um,
Yeah,
cells?
the cell-based. Yeah, there's some of
Yeah.
that, but there's a lot of, I mean, that's really exciting, and that gets a lot of kind of captures the public imagination. But I think the biggest work is more around the food technology that's just plant-based, that's not cell-based, because you don't
Yeah,
need to go through, FDA approvals type things for,
of course.
but it's basically just improving the quality and taste and flavors of all those plant-based substitutes so they can
Mm.
fit seamlessly into meat eaters' diets or products that would have meat or animal products that
Yeah.
just nobody will even notice, and they don't really
Mm.
care because it looks the same, tastes the same, smells the same, and is healthy.
Yeah.
So I find that really exciting as you know, as a solution for animal suffering,
Mm.
all these small replacements.
Yeah, and it's not so I don't see it as so much for like the people who are already there, who already eat
No,
plant-based diet, and especially, looking at health as well. I'd like to see these foods being like healthier because that's probably one of the biggest criticisms is like, well, eating meat is healthier than eating those, and in some situations, it can be, but it's more, I always see it as if we can get more meat eaters eating their food where they're still getting the taste and the texture that they love, but it's not causing, millions of animals to suffer and die. Um,
yeah.
but it's kind of like we need to get over the health hurdle. It needs to also be a healthy food to consume, I think.
Mm,
I've been following the work and just I don't think I don't want to just gloss over what's happening over there. But and so one of the groups I've been following is, I don't know if this is correctly, but I'm sure you know of them. Is it Silala Animal Rescue?
mm, yeah.
What I can see on Instagram, they're doing really, really great work with rescuing and looking after all the cats and all the dogs and the donkeys, and they're all feeding them and giving them homes, which is so, and they share reels of the cats, and then you can hear the bombings in the background, and it's just like I know they're just very impressed by the work that they're doing.
Mm. Yeah, no, Voiceless gave them a donation or a grant
Oh, great.
a few months ago, as well as organizations here in Israel who are, the border between Israel and Gaza is large, and
Mm,
animals, would be moving back and forth between those spaces
mm,
and still are. Um, and as we know, animals are victims of human. They've got nothing to do with
yeah,
our
yeah.
wars and politics, and are just innocent bystanders in this and deserve, all the protection that we can give them. So
Mm,
yeah, I applaud everyone who's trying to help. There's been a lot of animal, issues during the war. On this side of the border in Israel, there's been 250,000 families evacuated from their homes by the Gaza
mm,
border, and also in the north on the Lebanese border.
yeah.
Um, Actually, we've we, you mentioned that I have rescue hens, so now I
Yes.
got 7 more from a farm in the north that had been
Mm-hmm.
evacuated, and the animals were kind of stranded. So there's lots of activists going in to, you know, rescue and help the animals, not only dogs and cats, but the
Mm.
cows and chickens and geese and other animals that are just in evacuated areas and
Yeah.
are just the lowest priority. So
It's not
it's
just a
been it's
people
been amazing
problem.
to see. Yeah, the level of volunteers and activists,
Mm.
and also we went actually at the beginning of the war. There were so many dogs that were had lost their families, through all
Mm.
the people who were killed, and um, or who, yeah, for were in those areas that were evacuated. And so we thought we'll go and foster. We had two dogs, but we'll go
Mm.
and foster another dog. And we went to the shelter, and it was so packed with people wanting to help the animals that
Wow.
the police had to come and close down. They
Oh,
had to like cordon it off because it was just like thousands of people there. And
mm.
we actually ended up fostering and then adopting a dog from the Gaza border area,
I think
who's
I've seen
we
that.
might hear later in our
Yeah.
call
I think
because
I've seen that on your Instagram. I'm pretty sure
yeah,
our new
she's
dog
a
that's
she's a little
become
bit wild, very
wild's fun
spirited,
though. Mm.
but very, very sweet. Yeah, we love her. Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly, and obviously being over here, it's like, there's a lot of people speaking about it, but there's also a lot of people saying nothing about it and judging others for not saying anything about it. And it's just,
Mm.
gosh, it's, yeah, but I mean, you're so close to it. I didn't know that Voiceless gave them a grant. Is that on your website?
Yeah, we put it on our socials and website.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'll have to go have a dig
I'll
around.
send it to you.
I did have a dig around, but obviously not.
It was part of we do emergency grants every year for animals
Mm.
caught in conflict zones or natural disasters. And we've
Ah,
done the Ukraine and the floods and fires and different things. So that's the kind of extraordinary grants just to like do immediate help for animals who are caught up in whatever terrible situations they're in.
we didn't use. I don't think we did that when I was there, did we? So is that
No,
how long have you
that's a
been
new
doing
thing.
emergency grant?
Yeah, that's been a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 years now.
Sorry, kookaburras. Can you hear?
Oh, oh, lovely. Oh, I miss them.
Yeah, they sit right there in the gum tree, and they're in the
Oh,
morning and in the night, sun up and sundown. They're always like dong dong dong, having their little convention. So, I mean, I obviously know what Voiceless is, and so I'm just talking as though everybody knows what Voiceless is, but not everybody does know what Voiceless is. It doesn't just mean, I mean, it does mean, yes, without voices, which is the whole reason behind the name, right? But you're one of the co-founders. I want you to please to tell our audience today, what is Voiceless and what does it mean to you?
mm. Well, Voiceless is really an endeavor to try and help animals as best as we can. And with the priority and the focus being animals in institutionalized, systemic cruelty situations.
Mm.
Uh, so, as we know, there are billions of animals who are routinely, you know, held in captivity and mutilated without pain relief, and have all their rights and freedoms taken away from them in different farming practices, and
Mm.
we'll touch on kangaroos later, commercial killing
Yeah.
um, industries, and so on. So we at first we took a very pragmatic approach of we're going to focus on achieving as much as we can for the maximum amount of animals, so the animals like broiler chickens or battery hens or pigs, um, uh, dairy cows, and so on. And we've used, a whole range of different strategies over the years. And I feel, looking back, like proud of the fact that we've maintained Voiceless as a small organization, and that's been intentional. And wanted to, be able to be quick and adaptive to adopt new ways and new tools for creating change. So we've done a whole range of different, I guess, programs and projects, from our in-depth reports, kind of exposing industries and practices that are cruel, that we've targeted at politicians and lawyers and people in decision-making roles. We've done education programs for high school students, and earlier on for primary school, looking at, developing critical thinking around animals. And because what they receive in school is generally, I would say, propaganda from meat and dairy industries. Those industries fund school programs and have huge budgets to educate kids about why meat and dairy is great. Meat, dairy, and eggs, I should say. So yeah, we wanted to do education that counteracts that and brings other voices and other perspectives into the school system.
It's
So
really
yeah,
great.
reports.
Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's really great because it brings a balance of information. So yes, your industries, you can, put all your paraphernalia and provide that to the school system. But here's another opinion on what's going on. So, and that fosters, intellectual thinking and analysis and comparison and, what is right and what is wrong and what is the truth. And when you read them both together, it's like, well, they can't both be, it's complete opposite. This publication says that publication says that.
Right.
And it's critical thinking and tapping into, well, what do you believe now that you've read both sides?
Right. Yes. And I mean, it's so important for young people to develop those skills, and it's so lacking, sadly. I mean, in all areas, including animals, but having media literacy, so being able to like read things and see, okay, what's the person's agenda who's saying that, or what's the who are they funded by, or what's their greater aim, are skills that are important for life generally.
Yeah.
But as relates to animals, they're very critically important, because when you take a for-profit industry and believe what they say versus a non-profit whose aim is to help animals, like, you need to be able to see, to assess and analyze information in the context of where it's coming from, or whatever that might be.
Yeah, exactly.
So we try not to say like we're right and they're wrong, but just like, have a think about all the different narratives, opposing narratives and perspectives, and do your own research and look at, where information can be trusted and where it, should be less trusted.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really proud of that work we've done. And then, of course, animal law, which has been a great, I guess, success for Voiceless, because we were the first organization to really kind of highlight that and support that movement. And lawyers have been so enthusiastic, both law students and, law firms, about getting on board this issue and wanting to create change. So that's been I think one of our strongest tools.
Definitely. It was such a like no one else was doing it, and it was. I'm really bad with words tonight. Oh my gosh. It was just like a game changer. Like for me, it changed my life. Like when I discovered that there was such a thing as animal law, and I discovered it through Voiceless. As a lawyer who really wanted to be helping lawyers, it was like it opened up my mind as to everything that I've learned and been trained to be a lawyer, I can actually use that to help the beings that I'm most passionate about.
Mm.
And it set me on, and I know that this is a journey and experience that other lawyers have had as well. Like, I look at them now, all the lawyers or the aspiring animal lawyers that I had the privilege of like meeting, and the interns at Voiceless. Like, I was looking at one the other day and looking at where she is now, and it's like, oh my goodness, I felt so proud. But it's just like, it kind of set off this whole, it set, and it was an animal law movement.
Mm.
And it just, I mean, it already existed in the US, but in Australia, there was nothing until Voiceless.
Yeah.
And the law lecture series, like, as much as they were like really hard work to run, for those of you listening, it's like when I was there, it was like that was kind of like my job, one of my main jobs. And I got to manage who are we getting to speak, and I got to go around the whole country and all the flights. I got great frequent flyer points that I don't have anymore.
Who
Um,
were you with? Well, who was the
we
lecturer
did,
when you were?
so we did, I can never remember, I never forget, Antoine Gutschel.
Oh, okay,
Can't
right.
forget him, from Switzerland. Oh my gosh, what's her name? It starts with L. Leslie. We spoke about the seals. The seal
Oh,
hunts in Canada. Leslie Bisgold.
from Animal Legal Defense Fund? No.
No,
Uh,
Leslie Bisgold was her name. I think that was my
oh, right.
first one, and then it was Antoine.
Mm.
That was a fun tour with Antoine, and then he actually bought me this crystal butterfly that just broke recently. I was devastated.
Oh, wow.
I was like, it was beautiful.
Yeah, I mean,
And there was another
the
one because there was
law.
three. There was three. I did three
Okay.
tours, 3 tours of duty. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think the law people, I had a conversation not that long ago about animal law, and I'm not a lawyer, so I always am a little bit reluctant to talk too much about it. But I was saying how the law, how key it is to animal rights and animal protection, because everything is based on our laws. Like all our practices uh, are based on these very problematic set of laws and legal precedents, um, and law reform, even small things would have just major, major effects on the actual lives of animals.
yeah.
And the person I was speaking to was just like, wow, I'd never heard of it like that, and got very excited. I'm like, maybe I should study law too.
Mm.
But you don't really think of law that way. Um, but it's basically responsible for entrenching the suffering and cruelty of animals. I mean, that's where it lies in our laws. Uh, that farmed animals are just exempted from cruelty laws and, all these crazy, yeah, industry lobby kind of language is
Yes.
part of law and policy.
And the
Uh,
political nature of it all, which was also one
yeah.
of my favourite things when I was at Voiceless, was going and meeting with the politicians. And,
Mm.
and here's the Voiceless publication, because we're talking about chickens today. And, that was just the fight for, or the fight for changing the laws, for changing the systems, and going,
Yeah.
head to head with the people that could actually help us in bringing about those changes, changing the legislation. Such a huge, amazing aspect of Voices. Does Voices still have a lot of that political involvement?
Well, what we're doing currently is the first thing Voiceless did when we started in 2004 was a grants program, and this is something that I should have said as one of our key tools was building and empowering the animal movement in Australia, which was very fledgling, I would say, in 2004, and is much, much stronger and more of a force today. But
Mm.
we've returned to that model because there's still no funding available for animal advocates and small organizations, because of a law and government policy that exempts animal organizations such as Voiceless and Animals Australia and, Animal Liberation from getting DGR, deductible gift recipient status, which means there's no tax break for anybody who donates to us, which just has ramifications, huge ramifications, because that means foundations also by law can't donate to animal groups. So we've returned to our roots in a sense of doing seed grants, and some of the projects are around law and policy change. So we don't have it in-house anymore, but we've been supporting it through different projects.
Yeah.
And there's so much more animal law happening now in organizations and initiatives that, it's great to see.
You can step back to your roots. It's like you laid the groundwork, and there's a lot of new organizations that have come up, and that's their focus,
right.
law and policy.
Yeah, they have that expertise, like we did when we had lawyers in-house. But there's organizations and nonprofits and firms specializing in animal law now, which is fantastic.
And I always loved, like, when you see, obviously the awards nights were always very fun for, the winners of the grants and everything, but it was always great to see who was applying for the grants and the wonderful ideas that these people were having and what they wanted to create. And I think when, I encourage everyone to go and check out the Voiceless website and have a look at the grants that have been given, because it's really making a difference. Organisations that otherwise wouldn't have any money to be out there doing this good work to help animals.
Yeah. No, it's very inspiring. And people come from all walks of life and all different backgrounds, and they're passionate about all particular, niche areas.
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful to be able to kind of back them and give them a boost, both financially, but also help them build their networks and help them, capacity build in ways that, since we've had that experience, we can be a source of advice and support for our grantees, which is really wonderful.
So helpful. And how did Voiceless, I know this story. I had to know it for my interview. I'm sure I would have learned it for my interview, but obviously I learned it since then too, like being in there. But how did Voiceless come about? Could you share that? Because there's a beautiful connection there with that story. So with your father.
Yeah. So prior to Voiceless, I had my master's in environmental studies, and I was working for environmental organizations. But my heart, was kind of sore that I hadn't realized my promise to Bronny, my doggy, and I didn't feel like I was doing exactly what I needed to be doing. At the same time, my dad had a big financial management company, and he sold it and had some time on his hands. So I had this nefarious plan to to kind of bring him over to the dark side. And I suggested we go to an animal rights conference in LA together. And he agreed, which was amazing. And we spent 5 days in LA at this huge, very American-based animal rights conference. And we were just exposed to, the heads of, major organizations and films that were in development and all these issues, key issues about the movement. I knew already a lot of that stuff, having been always kind of active in the, the kind of animal movement. But for my dad, it was a total game changer. Very traumatic, I must say, for him. And at the end of it, he said, like, I'm on board, whatever you want to do, like, let's do something together. So, it took about a year, and we decided to start Voiceless together. And he brought all his business and finance, and also his connections in the, in the arts world, because my mum was in the arts world, or still is. And, his, they would be off to their cocktail parties with, heads of companies and so on. So he just grabbed everybody at these cocktail parties, would give them like lectures on the suffering of pigs,
Do you
and
know
then
where that came from?
drag them over to Voiceless to be our ambassadors and spokespeople. And I was also part of, mainstreaming the animal movement, because it was considered in those early years as being a very kind of radical or hippie or tree hugger or whatever words one wants to use to describe it, but not
Liberation.
a mainstream, legitimate, valid
Yeah.
issue.
Mm.
So yeah, we were a great, we were a great team, because I had come from the non-profit, world of trying to, save the world, I guess.
Mm.
And he came from his, business finance side, and we had very complementary kind of skills,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was the origins back 20 years now.
Yeah, 20 years, 20-year
Yeah.
anniversary this year. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And with those 20 years behind you now, like you must have, oh my gosh, you must have so many memories. And, but of those memories, surely there's some moments that stand out for you.
Hmm. Well, I was trying to think of this. It's hard to, I mean, there's so many different things, but I was trying to think of this because I was writing my piece for our upcoming annual report. I was like, oh,
Mm.
what are some key moments? So I don't know. Were you around for when we created the dairy report? Was that in your time?
I think that was
You'd
after.
probably remember it if it was, because
Yeah,
it was
no,
quite a big project
I think it was
afterwards.
after.
Yeah.
Like
So
I
that was a
did,
very,
yeah. I was there for the revision of the animal law toolkit,
okay.
and maybe the pig one.
Mm,
I have them all still somewhere,
yeah.
bookshelf over there
Well,
with my.
nothing's that much has changed, sadly, since those reports have come out for the animals themselves.
Yeah,
Some minor things, but the dairy report, I think, was quite seminal for all of us, because in Australia, at least, the kind of romanticism of the dairy industry and the feeling of, dairy cows being these happy, free ranging, animals that need to be milked for their own comfort type thing, what we've been told our whole lives, that, oh, it's, cows need to be milked,
mm,
otherwise they're uncomfortable.
we're doing them a favour.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, although I knew obviously a lot of the basic stuff, that deep dive into the real horrors of the dairy industry and the suffering of the cows, um, and then being able to get that out and get that information shared was really, yeah, I think an important moment for me and for Voiceless.
yeah,
Um, I remember a moment at the Voiceless Awards, being up on stage, giving a speech, and just looking out at the audience. I mean, this would happen every awards, really,
mm,
but this particular moment, and just thinking, wow, it's just so wonderful to be in a room of however many hundred people who are just all passionate about creating change for animals, and we all have the same, because it's such a, although I've been running this organization for such a long time and involved, it is a very inherently isolating thing
mm,
to care about, because we're a minority.
yeah,
Um, and, the most of the people around us, eat meat and aren't really that concerned about
mm,
animals and animal cruelty.
mm,
Um, So, it's very validating and I think very important. And those moments where we brought so many people together, both for the law lecture series and for the awards, was really lovely.
It's kind of like we're not alone, you know.
Yeah.
To be able, I mean, particularly for the awards night, you know, we all got to dress up and beautiful food and drinks, and it was a celebration.
Yeah.
You know, celebrating with a group of like-minded people, but from different sectors, you know, from all walks of life were there.
Yeah.
You know, that's where I met Lynn White from Animals Australia. It was one year, one of those awards night. I've got the photo on my website with the ABC reporter Sarah Ferguson, Lynn White, and me,
Right.
and it's kind of like one of my favourite photos.
Yeah.
Because it was just so, oh my God, these people. I'm surrounded by
Well,
these.
Sarah had won that award. Yeah, media
Yeah,
award.
exactly. For
Yeah.
the live X, was it for the live? I'm sure
Yeah.
it was for the live
I
May
think it was for the live
2021.
expo. Yeah, 60 Minutes or
Yeah, the live expo.
yeah,
Four Corners.
Four
And
Corners. Yeah.
yeah, she won that award, so that's why she was there. But and live export, Lynn, yeah. So it was just it's such an amazing event. Those events. The event of the
Yeah.
year. Mark it down. As we've heard, one of the core areas that Voiceless focuses on is factory farming. Every year, hundreds of millions of animals in Australia and more worldwide are confined in factory farms. Kept in a state of permanent confinement, animals are often crowded together in cages or sheds. Producers use a variety of artificial methods to increase production, such as the constant administration of antibiotics, artificial lighting, and selective breeding. According to scientific research, farmed animals are sentient. They are emotionally complex and intelligent. They have rich experiences of the world. On factory farms, animals experience numerous impacts on their welfare, including permanent confinement in cages or in sheds in such large numbers that they struggle to find space to move or reach their food. Mutilation of sensitive areas without pain relief, the tails, teeth, and genitalia of piglets, and the beaks of chicks are clipped, as well as the horns, tails, and testicles of calves, because it is practical, cheap, and alarmingly lawful to do so. This information can be found at voiceless.org.au. Did you know that pets are the second largest consumers of factory farmed meat after humans? As a conscious consumer and pet parent, I believe it's not just about my pet's health, but also the well-being of the animals that become their food that matters. It is vital to respect the ancestral and biological needs of cats and dogs while feeding them nutritionally superior food that honours where it comes from. At Frontier Pets, the mission is clear: to help end factory farming by reducing the demand for intensively farmed ingredients in pet food. As someone who deeply cares for all animals, companion, farm, and wild, I fully support this cause. If you share these values, I encourage you to explore Frontier Pets' range of nutritionally superior and ethical pet foods. By choosing Frontier Pets, you're not only giving your pet premium quality food, you're also supporting socially and ethically responsible practices. Visit frontierpets.com.au to learn more. With Frontier Pets, your pet can change the world. And as a special treat for my Natural Animal podcast listeners, you can enjoy 15% off your first order with the code NaturalAnimal15. Just a heads up, this offer doesn't apply to subscription orders. Now let's get back to Ondine. Yeah, any other kind of, I mean, yeah, it's hard when you look back over 20 years. It's like, oh my God, I don't know so many things.
Yeah. I mean, we've had so many people, wonderful staff members and people and, who've remained in touch or connected to Voiceless or, or
Yeah.
like you who have come back.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been a lovely, and I mean, it's not a moment, but just running the organization and creating it and everything with my father was just a kind of priceless experience because we were just so aligned on all our values and we just never had any disagreements about the things that really mattered.
Yeah.
Um, so it was just a pleasure, yeah, to be able to have that experience with him.
Yeah. Did you
Yeah.
have to go through much of a transition? Like it actually, there's a few losses that have happened from Voiceless. You know, very,
Yeah.
very, very sad. Even just in the movement generally, there's been quite a few, which is, you know, that happens. People pass over. Like, of course it happens, but it's like, it's still kind of like when you work so closely with someone, especially when you've created a whole organization.
Yeah.
um, it, you know, I can't, and if you can't answer it because this actually wasn't in the list of questions, but I think it's just the beautiful connection that you had and coming together and working as that team to create this magnificent organization, you know, and
Yeah.
now it's you.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you asked because it gives me an opportunity to mention Elaine, who
Yeah.
was
Well,
a
that's who
very,
I was,
very good
yeah.
friend of mine prior to Voiceless, and then came onto Voiceless as our first staff member
Mm,
when I went off on maternity leave to have my daughter Jasmine. And we had this, yeah, long, long friendship of both in our personal lives and family lives, and then also Voiceless on
mm,
a day-to-day level. And she passed away about 5 years ago, and that was, yeah, a huge loss for me on so many levels.
mm,
But she was also just kind of like my wingman or my wingwoman at Voiceless. And then with my dad's loss, well, he was sick for many years, so he
mm,
kind of was able to. He was very sad to not be able to kind of really engage for a number of years, and
mm.
yeah, it's a different feeling. It's
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, two different, one
but
was quite gradual and the other was quite sudden.
yeah, yeah, Lane was
So,
very sudden.
yeah,
But what can we do? The life,
life,
mortality.
exactly.
Yeah,
This is what happens, and you know, I'm sure
yeah,
they could possibly even be with us right now as we're having this chat. You know,
yeah.
like
No,
the spirit goes on.
I'm actually wearing Elaine's necklace today,
Oh
so
no! Perfect, perfect,
yeah.
perfect. Um, Going back to the 20-year anniversary, because I know Voiceless is celebrating this milestone in such a beautiful way. Can you tell us about this campaign that you're running at the moment? Finished?
So
Are
we
you still
thought,
choosing?
yes, we've had
Mm,
like input from our, social media followers and supporters about the next 10 animals to choose.
mm,
But the idea was, I mean, it's celebrating always feels a little bit of a tricky word because animals are still suffering and in much of the same terrible institutionalized kind of systems of cruelty as they were
yeah.
20 years ago. But we wanted to mark it by, um, I guess, acknowledging 20 animals that need our help
Mm,
and doing kind of micro grants to 20 organizations who are working to help them. So, kind of putting the spotlight back on the animals themselves.
mm,
We do a lot of time, empowering people and bolstering organizations and so on. But yeah, putting the spotlight back on animals and like what they're experiencing. So, we chose 10 animals to highlight and support. Um, and then we asked our community for ideas for the next 10.
mm.
And we're kind of finalizing that at the moment. So that's
So
been
Voiceless
a
has
really
chosen.
lovely, yeah.
Yeah, I thought when I saw that on the website, I was like, oh, I love that. So it's like Voiceless has already chosen 10 and you're finalising the
Yeah.
public votes. So who did Voiceless choose?
Oh, good
You probably don't
question.
notice
Let's
it's
see
a
if I
long
can
email.
remember the list.
I don't have that paperwork in front of me. People can go and
I
look on the
mean,
website.
we've done a mixture of farmed animals for the obvious reasons of, factory farming and the dairy industry and so on. And then we've done animals who are not in, I guess, industrialized kind of cruelty situations, but there's, government programs to kill them or they're exploited for other reasons. Um, so animals with who are on the list, for example. I mean, I'll choose like an animal that's people don't usually think about because I think it's important to think about these animals who are kind of forgotten. Crocodiles killed
Mm.
for, farmed intensively and then killed for the fashion industry.
They're also
Um,
killed for pet food now.
oh, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know that.
I'll,
Wow.
I'll, I'll send you some information.
Okay. So
But that'll
I don't
continue to
often get
be.
surprised by some new terrible thing that we're doing to animals,
Yeah,
but
it's for the dogs.
um,
It's similar to the kangaroo thing, but it's predominantly for um, dogs with allergies. So
hmm,
you can't feed those animals anymore. So now, well, let's feed these. Let's just get all of the animals that exist and feed them to dogs with
yeah,
allergies. That's where that's coming from. Novel proteins.
right.
Yeah.
Wow. Even though the information's coming out now about dogs and plant-based diets and how much healthier. Have you
Yeah.
read those studies? There's been some good
Yeah.
work being done there.
And it's something because of who I am a person, I do have clientele every now and again that want help with developing plant-based diets for their dogs, and I'm always happy to do that. Um, and then, sometimes when we're talking about allergies, it's like, well, if your dog is allergic to every protein, there is another option,
Mm,
plant-based. But
yeah.
I find that when I say that to non-plant-based people who aren't already eating plant-based, I can feel it. This kind of like wall goes up. So even with, research happens, but then it can take a lot of time before it actually gets into the public arena. And it's like, oh, yes, this is a thing. But, if you have a dog that's allergic to every protein because of eating, you need to put them on an elimination diet. Like,
Yeah.
they have things like hydrolyzed feathers and hydrolyzed proteins because that takes away the
Mm,
allergen component. It's all just very Frankensteinian. And it's like, well, you know what?
mm,
Let's just try it. It doesn't have to
yeah.
be forever a diet, but you might find that they do so well on it.
Yeah.
It's a whole, yeah, it's a whole thing. And there's so many ethical issues. Like one, it's like, well, how many more species are we going to, feed to our pets? And then what is the environmental impact? I have it in
Yeah.
my work. I'm recommend it's got to be human grade, not pet grade. But then it's like, well, there's a benefit for the animals in it being pet grade, and that's, well, all the scraps that aren't fed to humans, all the dirty bits, all the toxic bits. So I'm kind
Mm,
of like there. Well, that's all got to go to the scrap heap, and you've got to be feeding human grade. So then I have in my like frame of mind, it's like, well, if everyone was to feed human grade, how many more animals are going to be killed? So there's
mm,
so many ethical issues involved in it, and hopefully, some of the stuff I'm doing is helping to get eyes on that kind of stuff. But it's a whole other ball game. It's a
mm,
whole category within itself: factory farming, commercial kangaroo killing, pet food, because
yeah.
now it's not just kangaroo that you're getting in pet food. It's not crocodile. They're also wild boar, and they're all using the same lines of this is organic because it's wild and it's sustainable, and it's one of
Mm,
my pet peeves. And I always remember when I went head to head with the head of the kangaroo industry at, I can't remember what university it was, when I was working at Voiceless, and we had this debate. Oh, we've
mm,
got the laws, and I'm like, no, they're not enforced, and blah blah blah. All my lines from what I knew about the situation, what Voiceless knew about the situation, and like you see it, and it's like you're just spouting what the industry is saying, and it's not true.
Mm.
I could name a few brands, but I'm not going to. And it's just like, yeah, it's, and how many people have pets?
Yeah.
A
No,
huge,
it's a big market, a
big,
big issue.
big
Yeah.
issue. Yeah. Yeah. How did we get to that?
So kangaroos is one of the animals, obviously,
Yeah.
because we still have a very large commercial kangaroo industry with
Mm,
kangaroo meat and skins being exported around the world, especially to the EU and to the US. They use kangaroo skins. A lot of people don't realize, but in on sports shoes, soccer
yeah.
shoes, um,
Bowls.
and car seats,
Mm,
upholstery in cars. And yeah, there's a lot of work being done in the EU now, including my husband who did his PhD in kangaroos drawer,
yeah.
with his group of kind of kangaroo advocates to try and get kangaroo banned in the EU. They've
Mm,
banned seals from issues with the seal clubbing in Canada.
yeah.
So there is a precedent for banning animal products that are, yeah, are unethical. So
And
that's something that we've been working on and supporting for many, many years.
many years. Yeah. I mean, that's why we brought out Leslie from Canada to
Mm,
highlight comparatives between, you know, banning the seal hunt, ban the kangaroo hunt kind of thing.
yeah,
And also, the work that was done when there was that huge campaign and there was, the ban on Russia banning
yeah,
imports of kangaroo meat from Australia because of the
yeah,
contamination issues, But yeah, that work is ongoing. It's kind of like we're just still like fighting the same fight, Are we
mm,
ever going to get traction? And I guess I'd
mm,
love for you to speak because some of the listeners, they don't necessarily have the same knowledge, because they haven't been involved in the commercial kangaroo industry. Can you share with us you know, what are some of the problems that exist within the commercial kangaroo industry and why is it such a focus? I'm assuming it's still a focus, even though
mm.
you've gone back to the roots of the grants program. But why was it such a focus area, and why is it such an area? I'm just saying things in different ways. Why
Yeah.
is and was it a focus area for Voiceless?
Yeah.
What are the issues?
Well, I think it started off because we were so shocked that this was happening and nobody was talking about it. Like millions of kangaroos being killed every year. Um, and it just wasn't an issue that had any visibility. Why it's an issue is it is inherently a cruel industry that can't be made to be uncruel, even if you believe that animal industries can be humane. Um,
Mm,
this one is, there's no opportunity for that to happen because basically kangaroos, I don't know if everybody knows this, kangaroos aren't farmed. They can't be farmed. They die in captivity for the most part. So they are killed out in the bush. They're nocturnal animals, so it has to be at night. Australia, as we know, is a huge country. So it's
a
not
lot of
in,
dirt.
one particular area. It's across, tens of thousands of
Mm,
hundreds of thousands, I don't know what, of kilometers.
mm,
So basically you've got these licensed kangaroo killers who go out into very remote areas in the middle of the night. Um, Obviously, there can be no oversight of what happens out there. You can't have an inspector coming out because it's 3 a.m. out in whoop whoop.
I mean,
Um,
you could, but government workers aren't going to do that, you know,
I mean, the cost would
astronomical.
make the
Yeah.
industry, yeah,
Mm.
unviable. Uh,
But how else do
so
you properly enforce an industry that operates at night?
yeah, it's unforceable is
Yeah.
the issue. So they're out and they're, mandated to kill male kangaroos,
Mm.
but they often kill female kangaroos because it's very hard to tell from a distance at night very many details about the animal. They're also meant to get a clean headshot, which
Mm.
is very challenging also from a far distance at night. Um, and then there's the issue. So basically, you've got the issue of non-headshots, which is the animal slowly dying,
Mm.
the issue of females being killed, and females generally always have a joey in vitro, like or in their pouch or
Mm.
at foot. And
Yeah.
then the question is, what happens to these joeys? If the joey is strong enough, they will flee,
Mm.
but then they'll die because they don't have the mother's protection,
Yeah.
um, or they're meant to be bashed over the head on the tow bar of the car.
Mm.
Um,
And the code is
Again,
so vague around how to do that. And so that's what,
yeah, and again, there's no
over.
oversight, no enforcement, nobody's checking what happens. There's no real motivation for the shooters to behave ethically, and we know from undercover investigations that often they don't.
Yeah.
Um, and then obviously then destroying the mob of kangaroos, and that leads to a whole raft of problems in their own families and
Yeah.
social structures that don't get really talked about,
Mm.
because suddenly you've lost half the mob.
Yeah.
um, so those are kind of the cruelty issues that the industry can't address, and then the way that they sell it as sustainable and eco is just
Mm.
inherently flawed because the science just doesn't back that up.
Yeah.
And they cherry pick, scientific studies and ignore the ones that show kangaroos don't compete with sheep and cattle.
Yes.
Obviously kangaroos are native animals. They've been on the land for, I think hundreds of thousands of years.
It's
Um,
long before white man came along, that's for sure.
Yeah, so the whole notion that they're a pest animal is just absurd. Um,
And the
I mean,
very
the pest animals are the sheep and the cattle who are, you know.
Yeah, they're not native. It's like when you talk about plants and they talk about pests and weeds, it's like, well, the kangaroos belong here,
Yeah,
more than the sheep and the cattle.
yeah. If
But
we're going to take that framework, which is also problematic, dividing everybody into native and non-native and pests and
mm,
labeling,
yeah,
all animals
exactly.
as this or that. So it's yeah. So yeah, the industry is just kind of based on very false foundations, and they also know that people don't want to eat kangaroos. That's why they created a competition to rename kangaroo meat so it doesn't sound like the word kangaroo, because nobody is comfortable eating our national icon and
National.
our emblem, and the most famous thing about Australia. And living outside of Australia, I can attest to, like, that's the first thing people say.
Yeah,
And then of course I don't launch into how horrifically Australia treats its kangaroos. I
mm,
leave them in their naive bubble that they're
yeah,
beloved.
yes, yes. And, the science of kangaroos have this innate ability to, um, and a bit rusty on this, but stop a pregnancy.
Mm,
And the whole population thing that kangaroos are pests, and oh, there's so much rain, there's so many kangaroos, we need to kill them because they're just taking over. They're going to breed and have all these babies and da da da. But it's like, well, when you actually study the way that the species functions in terms of breeding and how they change their breeding cycles to suit the weather, to suit the climate, because they have that innate intelligence. Oh, it's a drought.
yeah.
It's not a good time to have babies. And whenever I tell people that, they're like, oh my God, that's so amazing. I'm like, I cannot remember the full science around it, but I know it to be true. You can read, Voiceless did a number of publications on it. You can read them.
Yeah,
Goes
no,
through all
that's
the
right. They'll
science.
pause the development of their fetus,
Exactly.
because the environmental conditions aren't right. And
Mm.
and the whole kind of myth of kangaroos, being overpopulated because of watering holes and whatever kind of nonsense that is. It's just there's just no basis. And the whole, even the methodology of them assessing kangaroo numbers
Mm.
is very flawed. I mean, they, yeah, are using, I won't get into all the
Yeah,
numbers and everything, but
yeah.
they're using, how do you count the number of, I mean, firstly, there's so many different species of kangaroos. How do you count the numbers of one kangaroo species to ensure that it's, not becoming threatened? You
Accurately
can't send,
identifying.
10,000 planes out in the skies of Australia and have people counting. So they take one tiny little sample in one particular
Location.
ecosystem on one particular season and then extrapolate and announce that, there's more kangaroos or the kangaroos are fine.
Yeah,
But we don't know. We don't know how we're affecting them, but likely not very well.
mm. And if people
Yeah.
do want to really get into the science of it, like in terms of, the population counts, this is detailed in very much detail. It was a joint publication from memory. I still have them along with all the other Voiceless publications. The Centre for Compassionate Conservation
Mm,
and Voiceless. I think there was 3, maybe another one. Publications just on the kangaroo issue, and really, really detailed, referenced publications that you can really dive deep into this and go, huh. It's like what we were talking before about, school kids, the industry coming in with their publications, Voiceless coming in with theirs, and so seeing, read all that stuff, all the stuff that the industry tells you, but look at this other side and then make a fully informed decision about really, is this something
mm,
that you want to support?
yeah.
Mm. But then,
Yeah.
but I find it with a lot of the pet parents, which a lot of pet parents listen to this show. I will often say to them, there are a number of ethical issues, but there is all, because usually I find that what gets them more, they're more interested in is the health issues of eating,
Mm,
feeding in this instance to pets, but obviously the humans eating it too. But the health implications of eating kangaroos, which I don't know if you remember, Ondine, but when I was there, that was when we partnered with Animal Lib,
mm.
with
To do
Mark
the
Pearson when he was,
study. Yeah.
yeah, and Draw, and we went, and I didn't go to them, but that, it was partly, anyway, um, doing these studies of tests on kangaroo meat sold for human consumption,
Mm.
and what animals are
Well, yeah.
findings, the contamination, the bacteria, the E. coli, the salmonella. I'm just
Yeah.
stealing
Which
your
is why
thunder, sorry.
Russia
You
banned
can
it.
speak to it.
Yeah, no, exactly. If you just think of like what that kangaroo goes through. So, I guess to finish the story, so the kangaroo shot, let's think like it's 35 degrees heat, middle of summer, the middle of the night. The kangaroo carcass is being like disemboweled, put on
Mm,
the back of their ute, and driven through hundreds of kilometers till they get to the chiller.
mm.
And so they spend however many hours, killing the kangaroos, putting them up on the back of the ute,
Filling up their ute.
all the flies and heat and bugs. And then you've got all the dirt spraying
Mm.
from the back of the ute. They're not covered, it's just
Yeah,
into the carcasses.
yeah,
You get to the chillers, um, and then you just think of, I'm not a scientist, so I, can't, this is what I understand of the situation.
mm,
But basically the meat is then basically washed with acid to just kill off everything.
yeah,
Because otherwise God knows what would happen to us if, someone ate. And then the industry, recommends cooking it very well because they know that there's still stuff in there.
yeah.
So it's just inherently a very, you know,
From all angles.
yeah, it's like a very, what's the word? It's a, yeah, it's an issue that can't be resolved by the nature of the industry that they're out in the bush
Yeah,
and, and
they're
killed in
active
that
at
way.
night.
And the trucks aren't chilled themselves and they're
Mm,
not sterile. So for someone who's interested in health and maintaining hygiene, it's not a not something one can reconcile.
Mm.
Yeah.
And also, particularly, just going back to the pet food industry again, it's like a lot of the kangaroo is fed raw. So whilst the
Mm.
industry is recommending it needs to be well cooked to kill all the bacteria that's in there because it's naturally inherent because of the way, we're killing them in the wild and the way the whole process is with the putting the carcasses on the truck, filling up the truck, then going to the chiller, which is not always necessarily a sterile environment. It's that, pet parents are feeding kangaroo and they're feeding it raw.
Yeah.
And any other meat, it's fine to be fed raw. But yeah, kangaroo, you've got that whole, I've worked with people who their animals react badly to kangaroo.
Mm.
And I always say, don't feed it, feed something else.
Yeah.
But, we can share the information and then it's up for the people to make up their own minds about what they want to do.
Yeah. Well,
Thank
it's,
you.
we need consumers and to make responsible choices, but we also need law and government and, responsible decisions from that side. And, everything needs to come together to kind of create change. So we
Mm,
put a lot of pressure on consumers, I guess, to be constantly like checking labels and making sure this, but at the end of the day, that's why we have a society where our interests should be protected, and those interests are meant to be protected by our lawmakers and law
mm.
leaders, and that's why animal law is so important.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Money is kind of like this ruling force, this profit driven
Mm.
everything, I want to shift tactics a bit to some of the things that weren't a thing when I was at Voiceless that I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like the Voiceless Animal Cruelty Index. What is that and what does that do?
So that came to us as a couple of guys who are passionate about data and creating indexes of data.
Mm,
Um, they had a background of working for kind of international agencies. So they came to us with this, what was then a almost fully formed kind of analysis of the top 50 countries in terms of not the best 50 countries, but the 50 countries in the world that um, where the most animals are killed for, by humans.
mm,
Uh, and doing an analysis of both their animal laws and policies, but also consumption of animals
mm,
and what was the other factor? Slipped my mind for a moment, but basically looking at um, what the overall animal welfare, um,
mm.
I guess, result would be for that country.
Yeah.
And Australia was at the bottom of
Wow.
those 50 countries, like the worst. Um, and it's because we are, I think us and the US are the highest meat eating countries in the world
Yeah.
per capita. We just consume extraordinary amounts of animals. And also
Australians
our
love their
laws
barbecues.
are, hmm,
Australians love their barbecues.
yeah, yeah, it's really embedded in our culture. And, uh, and our laws are very, you know, very bad compared to other countries.
Mm,
So it was a really important exercise, both to be able to put Australia in the context of the rest of the world, because the government's often saying, "Oh, we're a leader in animal welfare." They love saying we're a leader in animal welfare. There's no data to suggest we're a leader in animal welfare. It's actually the opposite. We're a failure in animal welfare.
yeah.
Um, so having that number crunching and then being able to be really transparent about how those numbers were come to and what algorithms were used,
Mm,
I think was really important. And I think a lot of students and the other people I've heard feedback that they found it really useful, or people in the movement, to be able to quote and look, how those numbers were came to.
mm. Is that still a live, active project? Is that something that?
I think at some point soon it'll. we'd have to probably pass it on to someone, another organization who can keep that updated, because, every few years, there's new data that comes out around, from government around slaughter, numbers. It's quite an in-depth research project. So we don't have the capacity anymore to be able to go through and check every data point for all those countries and make sure they're still valid and then update them. But I think it's still helpful as as a big picture kind of snapshot. And fundamentally, sadly, not a huge amount, as we know, has changed, definitely over the last, 3 to 5 years. So it would still be, pretty valid at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to see it continue, but it's particularly for if you think about, high school students and university students doing assignments or even, PhDs and things like that. It's a useful tool for that. But I guess it's kind of like, well, how can it be utilised more? It would also be beneficial, when you speak to politicians and fighting for legislative change to be able to, so lawmakers and change makers, it would be a valuable tool. And then you've got the collaboration with the Israeli Human and Animal Institute. Can you tell us about that one as well?
So this is one of our grantees, and while we were Voiceless over the years has maintained its only Australia only borders. In recent years, we've kind of broadened and basically opened up our program to anybody who wants to apply from anywhere. And we're especially interested in, I guess, programs that are happening not in the US or the UK that have such strong movements. So this is an example of one of our international grants, and it's an organization here who's doing really great work in the education system. As I mentioned before, like in school education, kids are receiving a lot of industry material and industry communications. And they'll go out for farm visits and all these kind of things. Sorry if my dog is barking in the background. Hope that doesn't come through. Okay, good. So one of their programs is they've created an amazing partnership with the kind of leading Israeli book like education suppliers. So the guys who create all the textbooks for different classes. And so even a subject such as maths or biology, the way that they talk about animals in those subjects can often be in a very disrespectful way. They're just seen as objects, like count the number of, I don't know, tigers in the zoo or whatever it might be. So they've firstly gone through and worked to create more respect and thoughtfulness around animal messaging in textbooks. And then they've also created like a whole online program for school students to learn about all different animals in their society. So that could be, there's a lot of street cats here, street cats or donkeys or, birds, as well as, chickens and animals that are consumed for food. So there's not that many really fabulous education programs for kids that are pro-animal. And we're always looking to support, really excellent work, because one of my passions has always been young people and helping them to, as we mentioned, think critically and develop a kind of respect for animals that's outside of the usual social teachings.
And that is such a beautiful segue into the books, the young adult fiction books that you have written. And, you can see that there is this passion for the young adult education and inviting them to think differently about animals. And you've got your I think your first, what have I got written here? The first book was called Sky, that you wrote in 2019. And it's part of a Young Animal Ally. And can you tell us a bit about, like, I've actually got an excerpt here, and that if there's time, I want to read some of it out to our listeners, because it's just, I love it. Like, I think it's a really, I'm going to let you speak to your inspiration for Sky and that series overall.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, it's
that
another
was,
side of you, like it's
yeah,
voiceless, but it's still doing the animal advocacy in a very
yeah.
creative way.
I guess probably most things that we do have come from some kind of childhood need or some connection. And this was certainly, when I was growing up, there really weren't any books that had characters like me who were like passionate about animals, let alone characters who were vegetarian or vegan.
Mm,
Um, and or didn't really bring up any issues about animals that I, learned were having, these terrible experiences. So, so this was my attempt to kind of bring in, and still to this day, there's very few books that do this, and this was my attempt to bring another voice into the young adult literature.
mm,
And I wanted to make it like a really compelling story, that's so it's not like, yeah, didactic and, trying to be a teachable moment for anybody.
mm,
It's just like a fun book to read.
yeah.
So it was a really wonderful creative process for me just to create characters and create these storylines that involve being a teenager, for all that's involved, relationships and friendships and your family and, yeah, coming of age.
Mm,
And then kind of intertwined is this particular character whose name is Sky. It's her love for animals and her learning about, things as she comes across them. But yeah, as part of her, I guess, journey as a young woman in Australia.
mm.
Um, so it was fun. It was difficult, challenging, but fun. And then we built education materials around it at Voiceless. So English teachers could use the books in schools
Okay.
and have it linked to the curriculum in different ways.
I wish these books existed when I was reading young adult fiction. I would have had it alongside my Judy Blume books, right?
Yeah.
different kind of context, covered, but different genres. But I would have been like, oh, this is so cool! Oh my gosh! But I want to read, because you can see like the themes that are in there. So I think it's in the very first chapter. Felt kind of a bit weird reading your book to you, but really it's for the audience. But it says here, finally Paula finds a station and turns up the volume. The barrier finishes and the landscape is dotted with garish red and yellow McDonald's signs and those of other fast food chains. It brings back a memory. Let's convince Macca's and those big chains to switch to free-range eggs, Mum had said a year ago. We'll start an online petition. But the free-range egg industry buys its hens from breeders who kill millions of male chicks, remember? I promptly Googled an article from the RSPCA to show her. I turned vegetarian 2 years ago, and for the last 8 months I've been vegan. This was... I know, but better something than nothing, don't you think? Although Mum couldn't make the jump from omni, that's what vegos call people who eat animal products, to vegan, she was super supportive. But if you want, we can start another petition for them to add a veggie burger. How's that, sunshine? And so there's this beautiful relationship between the mother and the daughter is like, she was vegetarian, then she became vegan. And seeing obviously, the yellow arches and what goes into, the food production. So you're bringing in this beautiful, the memories of the relationship with her mother, but with that, those really kind of like important animal welfare or suffering topics into the storyline, which I love. And it's like the relationship with the mother. Mum and I shared a love of animals. Our building didn't allow pets, but Mum always pounced on dogs in the street, showering them with cuddles, their owners taken aback by the strange woman with long bohemian plaits interwoven with shells and beads. And I'm the same. When I walk around, I see only one thing: dogs. I love them all: black, brown, spotted, shaggy and curly, noses long or piggy, eyes bulging or almond. Who's the inspiration for the mother in the book? Is there someone? Is it you?
I mean, I did. No.
You've
Sounds like
never worn
shells in
long
my hair.
bohemian
Sounds
plaits?
quite like relaxing. Um, maybe for a beach holiday at some point. But no, I think what was fun was creating these like combinations of people into different characters, and taking a bit of someone I met with a bit of a friend of mine with a bit of, and just so that it's not based on anyone in particular. But yeah, it was when you start writing, you also become like hyper observant, and like start looking at people and going, oh, like I never noticed that you can do your hair that way, or that people sit like this in a cafe. And because when you're writing, you have the descriptions is what tells the story in a way. So you're like describing a scene and an interaction, and you have to use these minute descriptions to really paint the picture. So I think I also just became very observant of different types of people and different styles, and combined it with things I'd heard. I mean, people, friends of mine who read the book, would say, "Oh God, Sky sounds a lot like you," but I don't think so at all, actually, because I was much more shy and introverted, and kind of wasn't up for confrontations with people at all when I was growing up. I kept everything much more to myself, and Sky is a real, lets it all out, and she's very, she's kind of flares up quickly and has these, moments of being a little bit, passionate. So, oh, there's your cat. um, so that was really fun, creative process, and a nice balance to, I guess, all the years I spent at Voiceless, and also other groups, focusing on all the dark, very serious, stressful, traumatic issues. And this was a way to add a little bit of lightness and creativity into my advocacy.
Yeah, and it is like there's this passage here where you can see that she's more she is like she's got her own sorry people, I'm distracted with my cat brushing my face with his clearly trying to get my attention. Yes, darling. She's got she writes blog posts, and she's got her Instagram. Like she's like what does it say here? I follow her inside, which was her mother, I think, and scan the large takeaway fridge. Ham sandwich, chicken salad, sausage roll. I look around quickly before taking a picture. I post it on Instagram with the caption, where are the hashtag veggie choices? Hashtag team vegan, hashtag West Creek, hashtag West Creek animal lovers. Just in case there's a single soul out there who cares. I can use the photo later on a new guest blog post I'm writing for an animal lovers website. I've already written 2 posts and had 2 comments and a thumbs up. I've been asked to write another, but don't know what it will be about yet, even though I'm nowhere near good. I love writing and it's good to practice. So very inspiring. And, for all the other, there could be people listening to this going, oh, I'm going to get these books for my daughter or my son, and they love animals. And, I think it's really inspiring for them to see, we can talk about it. And you can be this if you want it. Maxie, you can be this if you want to be this. So how many books are there in the series?
There's 3 books. The second book, she goes off to Alaska because not to give a spoiler alert, but she's visiting her father, who she hadn't met before.
Yeah.
And then some of the issues of hunting and other animal issues come up over there. And I've been to Alaska a couple of times, so I drew on that experience. And then the third book, she's back in Australia, and it's a little bit more set in the world of the kind of vegan animal rights movement, because she starts entering that space and has some really positive but very negative experiences as well. So the theme of kind of social media and perhaps some dangers of social media come out through that third book.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's different, it's all written from her perspective, just grappling with her beliefs and how she, you know, communicates herself in the world. And yeah, I got great feedback from young people, and I still just the other day got a picture from this young girl who's like, "This was my favorite book ever," and
So
so
nice.
that's nice. That's what I did it all for. But
Yes.
yeah, it's kind of touched the hearts of
Mm.
some young people, and I think made them feel a bit less alone in their love and care about animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously with the modern day themes of, yeah, like you say, social media and what have you, and the challenges that they face. You have a daughter, don't you?
Yeah, so I was going to mention there is a little bit of her popping through there, because when I started writing it, she was around, God, I think 11,
Yeah.
something like that. So some of her turns, and she actually for the first book, I got her to read chunks of, my dialogue between Sky and her friends and things, to do like a sense check. I'm
Yeah.
like, does this
This is what
sound?
teenagers
And
talk.
yeah, and she had her feedback and criticisms. So she helped me. She helped me kind of get the tone right, because she's a huge reader. She was always a bookworm from when she was really little.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she's not like Sky in the sense that she's had me as her mother, constantly ranting and raving about animals her whole life. So she's,
Now, yeah, so for anyone out there who's got, teenagers who loves animals, strongly recommend you check out Ondine's books. I actually
thank
checked to
you.
see if they are at my local library, and they're not. And you can request You can request the library to get books in. So I think I'll just
Mm.
do that, just to get.
Okay, great.
I don't know if that
Thank you.
impacts your sales, obviously, but it probably does, because people are borrowing it instead of buying it. But I think you're more concerned about getting the
No, I
out.
just want people to read and enjoy them. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Are there any more fiction books in the works?
I'd love to go back one day, but I've been very preoccupied with doing a PhD for the last couple of years, which
Yes.
has kind of taken a lot of my mental energy, apart from working on Voiceless. So I'm hoping to turn the thesis into a book that'll be, valuable and interesting for people.
Mm.
But I would love to go back to the fiction, yeah, the world of fiction. And continue on, maybe not with Sky, although I've had thoughts about her as a grown up and
Mm.
continuing on with her character, which I think I'd find enjoyable. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and,
for the moment it's on pause.
yeah, and you've written other books as well, and you've got your like the I can't remember them all, but I know there's the chapter. I did read the chapter in the Campfire. What's it called? Campfire for
Yeah.
a Woman's Heart, and in that you talk about your sons, your two boys,
Yeah.
and their rare health disorder, which is not relevant to animals, but I think it's still a big part, obviously, of your life, and
Yeah.
what you went through at that time. Did you want to share anything on that at all?
Yeah. Yeah. I think at the time it was, apart from the challenges of having two kids who are severely disabled, I couldn't really find the balance between doing Voiceless and looking after them and all that involved at the time. So I took a break from Voiceless for a few years. Um, and that was tough. Yeah, as an animal advocate to, you know, and we were doing so many awesome things in those years as well,
Sorry.
but I just couldn't balance it all and, feel like I was doing a good job at everything.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, I remember sitting next to, we were invited to a kind of a lunch of, I think it was women in leadership, and Quentin Bryce, the ex-governor general, was giving a speech, and she came down and sat next to me for a few minutes during the lunch, and I was having this real, um, you know, real difficulty deciding what to do because I just felt like I just like wasn't managing. And I kind of asked her because she had mentioned she had many children. I can't remember how many, but she
Mm.
had a lot of children. And I was like, how did you manage to do that? And her CV is just like unbelievable and be so successful and so, all these achievements.
Oh,
And she said at the time, something that really stuck with me and helped me make the decision was like, well, I didn't do it all at the same time. There were years where I focused on my kids, and there were years I focused on my career. And you can't really do it all at once. I mean,
yeah.
something has to give, and you have to know that something has to give. And yeah, that really helped me because I think I was, under this impression, as many women are, that we can have it all, we can do it
Mm.
all, we can juggle everything, and it's pretty pretty hard to do
Yeah,
that.
if you want to burn yourself
So
out and get sick and
yeah,
fall on your face. Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
yeah, something gives.
Yeah.
Um, so so I knew I would always go back to animals, and
Mm.
I guess that gave me the kind of a little bit of the space to start journaling and then to start writing, and
Yeah.
that led into my memoir, which was the first thing that I published, called The
Mm.
Miracle of Love, which was about my whole journey with my boys, and
Mm.
then. Funnily enough, that led me, because I love the writing process so much, that led me into the sky fiction. So I kind of came back full circle and managed to, yeah, join those two different parts of
Isn't
my
it,
life
isn't
together.
it interesting that, life presented you with these two beautiful boys with this rare disorder that at the time, I mean, I can't even imagine how challenging it would have been for you, but also to be stepping away from, your soul work. But then how you've come out of that at the other end and everything that you've learned through it and what that, the gifts, obviously the gifts of them and what you've learned and learning from them. But it brought you into this, this writing,
Mm,
a whole other way to express, your love for animals, through that experience, which is obviously ongoing, but
yeah.
it's funny how life works sometimes.
Yeah, you don't always know at the time where
Mm.
things will lead. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess we have to learn to trust that it's all going to come together or make sense
Yes,
at some point in the future.
everything happens for a reason. We don't know what that reason is now, but we will
Yeah,
know in the future at some point, hopefully, when we've got the
yeah,
benefit of hindsight. Yeah.
yeah.
So, what's in store for you in the future? Like, what's in store for Voiceless?
Well, Voiceless has been, yeah, it's been going great the last few years with this new model, which is, really kind of backing and partnering and funding different initiatives.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's continuing. And I guess Voiceless will always adapt and change to, you know, how if I see a new way of doing things better, if I find, other people to partner with, it's it's a work in progress. And I think I think that's important. Coming from the world of nonprofit world and having worked previously for a lot of different large organizations, small and large, um, I think just staying with the same thing and the same systems and the same programs is not
Mm,
helpful, you know, uh, way to do things. I think, the world's changing,
yeah.
and we have to be adaptive. So I guess, yeah, to answer, like, it's going great and who knows
Who knows? We'll see what
what
the
will
future
happen.
holds. Yeah.
But everything will be with the vision to help animals as best I can,
Mm,
as you say, is my soul work.
mm,
And my PhD is aligned with that people's values and attitudes towards animals and how to influence, or what influences positive values. So hopefully my findings from that can
yeah.
also come together with Voiceless and the animal movement and be
Mm.
helpful. And yeah, I mean, I'm just,
Then we'll have to
you
call you
know,
Dr. Ondine.
yeah. Let's not count our chickens till they're hatched, but hopefully in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing how things unravel. I'm, getting involved a little bit in the animal studies world and the academic world, which is a really interesting, very multidisciplinary, I guess, community of people who are doing research, scholarship into the human animal relationship.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a whole different, I guess, approach to creating change for animals through the academic side, which I think, is very important as well. So
Mm.
um, yeah, we'll see if I can bring all of those together at some point.
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to watch your journey and Voiceless's journey to see how it evolves.
Yeah.
And how can people get involved and support Voiceless's work?
I mean, I think we, join our database where we communicate everything that we're doing, and we also, share a lot of our partners' work and try to elevate other different voices from Australia and from other countries. Um, and of course, you can support financially. All the money now goes into the grants program. So all the internal costs are covered through previous bequests and family support.
Mm,
So we're one of the kind of very rare organizations where donors' funds are all going straight to the issue itself,
yeah.
which is nice.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, I think I just encourage people to get involved in the movement in general, voiceless or not. Like if
yeah.
you love animals and care about animals, it in whichever way that you can, if it's from fostering animals in your home to joining a campaign, or volunteering as part of your professional life. Uh, it's so important to grow the movement. It's still such a tiny minority,
Yeah.
underfunded, sidelined movement in Australia
Mm,
and worldwide, that we need all the help that we can get. So,
yes.
yeah.
Yes. That's definitely true. And my final question that I ask all of my guests. Sorry, Max is just depositing all of his hair over
Yeah, I'm
my
getting an itchy face looking at
and it's sticking to my lips.
you.
Yes, I know, darling.
It's very fluffy.
He's very, very fluffy. Um, if there was one thing you could change about the human animal relationship, what would it be?
Mm. Oof.
I know.
I mean, I think in Western society today, our relationship is based on such flawed ideas
Mm,
and philosophies of animals as property, animals as objects, humans as having the right to do basically whatever we want to animals for the sake of profit and
mm,
our enjoyment and entertainment.
Yeah.
So I guess fundamentally, I would change that relationship and elevate animals, so it's more egalitarian, and we're seeing them as family and co-beings on Earth with us,
Yeah.
and respecting them for their unique abilities and capabilities, and the beauty that they bring to our planet and our lives.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it would be a deep shift in our perceptions.
It would, but we can dream and dreams can come true. So
Yes.
more of us that dream
Yeah.
it will dream it into reality, right?
Yeah. A utopian future.
Exactly.
I think so.
Thank you, Ondine. Thank you for everything that you shared and being so open. And it's just, Voiceless is continuing to doing amazing work as it moves and shifts with the climate. And I'm looking forward to seeing the books that you bring out in the future and what Voiceless does in the future. I hope everyone's enjoyed this chat today with Ondine. Encourage everyone to go and check out Voiceless. Like I said, if you've got teenagers, you might want to go and buy Ondine's books for them to have a read. You might even read them yourself. But yeah, thank you so much, Ondine.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all your work and for having me on.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
talking.
I hope you enjoyed learning more about Ondine, Voiceless, and the incredible work that they do for animals. Be sure to head to voiceless.org.au to learn more and support the organisation. If you loved this episode, please share it with your fellow animal lovers. I'd love to receive your feedback on this and any of the other shows too. You can comment on your favourite streaming platform or head to my website, ruthhatton.com/podcast, and fill out the feedback form. In this form, you can also include your suggestions for future topics and guests. And if you're looking for pet food that contains premium quality ingredients sourced from ethical Australian suppliers, be sure to check out the sponsor of this podcast, Frontier Pets. They provide better pet food for a better world. Until next time, much love to you and your animal kin.